parking is easy. Now, this guy might be not big. But the Hyundai Inster is even less not bigger. Yeah, that'll things are big. Alright. Oh. Don't twist the belt.
Continuity error! Insert child.
Got to change an nappy or whatever it may be. That's handy. Genuinely didn't think that was going to happen with space for family.
What day is it?
Oh,
There was a little Spanish.
when it comes to buying any retail product out here in the real world, we're always trying to do the right thing. Well, most of us anyway. We're trying to make the right choice, get the best value for money. It's pretty simple, right? We spend a little bit more to get a better quality product, or most likely spend a little bit less so that we can afford more of the important things, pay the bills, maybe even add to your super. But like any middle income earner, we're all just trying to get the best bang for our buck. But when it comes to buying any new car, we're usually trying to get the most amount of car for the money. But after driving the Hyundai Inster for 2 weeks, I've come to realise the absolute con that we've all been sucked into. If you think about it, more car is what you, me, we have all been told we need by others. And over the last 20 years, cars have grown and grown and become packed with more and more. But exactly what does the expression bang for your buck actually mean? If you want to know the truth, stick around. Let's apply some logic here. A bigger car is heavier. Bigger cars require more fuel to move it every time you stop at the lights. A big car is harder to park compared to a small car and more susceptible to others hitting it. A bigger car needs bigger tyres. The higher it is off the road, the worse the centre of gravity, so it doesn't handle as well as something small. Cars are for moving people and things. So let's talk about boot space. Every car review will tell you the volume of the boot, but with minimal context or reference for comparison. But a bigger boot is only relevant if you actually fill it, right? How often do you actually see a car's boot completely full? In your daily commuting, dropping off the kids at school, running them to sports on weekends, doing the shopping, how often do you actually use every litre in that boot? Now, how often do you watch some poor sucker, backing into poles or inching the nose of the car into a parking space, terrified of scraping the paint? It happens every day. We need to stop buying so much car. Beware the irrational, however seductive. The other problem with bigger vehicles is they require more expensive maintenance. They're more expensive to insure. Their tyres cost more. They cost more to buy outright. Yet we complain about the cost of living. So what you end up paying for is a greater expense. It's like buying a colander with bigger holes. You're paying to make yourself poorer and all the good stuff falls out. While you're also getting around in an underappreciated, underutilized, depreciating asset. I don't even like using the word asset because assets are supposed to enrich you and gain value over time. Cars are a tool. They are a device for moving you, your family from one place to another, sometimes with a little bit of cargo on board. So if you already have a dual cab ute or a people mover or maybe even a bigger SUV or a 4x4 or something else for those more arduous, more specific but less frequent demands like family road trips, towing trailers, taking the twins to daycare, or you probably don't actually need a big EV. In fact, you probably don't need most EVs on sale in Australia right now. For all of life's suburban running around, you need a small, efficient, affordable appliance. An appliance, a tool, the toaster. You need the right tool for the job. An appliance that suits your budget and your needs. That's it. This is why the Hyundai Inster is my new favourite electric vehicle, and it probably should be at least considered by you in the context of buying an EV, especially in Australia right now. Size. The Hyundai Inster is about 25% longer than the original British Leyland Mini from the 60s. That's right, the Mr. Bean car. Only the Inster comes with all of the latest safety trimmings on modern cars like curtain airbags, knee airbags, adaptive cruise control, crumple zones, blind spot monitoring and emergency braking, auto emergency braking. But it's 20% shorter in length than a typical medium SUV. And there are benefits to being only 3.8 metres long. It fits inside the wheelbase of most dual cab utes. It also fits, well, almost fits inside the wheelbase of my favourite big family car, the Kia Carnival. But unlike a medium SUV, the Inster doesn't cost the additional $20,000. It starts at 40 grand. And that's actually pretty affordable, especially if you already have the bigger primary car that takes care of all the big holiday road trips and all the bags and esquis and towing and boats and all that sort of stuff when you go up the coast for 4 hours. So how often do you see the typical 7-seat large SUV loping around the local shopping centre, making 10-point turns, trying to get in and out, and you just sit there for what feels like half an hour, sitting there thinking, as I do, you've bought a tank and you can't drive it, love. So let's talk about the boot. Yes, surprise, surprise, it's a small boot. It's only 280 litres. But guess what? That's about the size of a Subaru Crosstrek or a Mazda CX-3, roughly. I mean, are you really going to get out your tape measure and measure it? And CX-3 and Crosstrek are two very popular small SUVs. If you have a medium SUV with about, say, 500 litres of boot space, but you only use 280 litres, let's say that's only half of its capacity being used, but you're using that same 280 litres in an Inster, which means you're using 100% of its capacity. And if you need more space, you're going to do what everyone else does. You put it in the back seat in the footwell. If you need more, you use the front footwell. You need any more, you might put it on the seat and clip it in with the seatbelt. There are options is what I'm saying, but being about 10 to 15% narrower than a typical SUV means there's more precious inches for, carefully opening the doors, wedging your fingers between the door and the car beside you so that your kid can get out without damaging their paint or yours. It's the same story with metal zippers on bags and jackets and stuff. Less car, more space, less scratchy. But there is a problem with using a combustion vehicle to pop up to the shops. Combustion. Yes, I did just turn on the light. There are 3 things that combustion engines hate most: cold starts, not being driven, and not being serviced. Obviously, not being driven isn't a factor, and not being serviced is a thing that is entirely your responsibility to take care of with any vehicle. But the cold starts, they are often paired with short trips in the same way tomato sauce goes on a meat pie. Cold starts are torture for engines in an engineering sense because they mean a lot of mechanical contact is happening in the intervening milliseconds to seconds between the ignition sequence and oil being pumped around the motor to lubricate all the moving parts. Now, if you do this repeatedly for years and years, twice a day, once in the morning and again in the afternoon as you go about your daily routine, this prematurely wears components compared with, say, a small battery pack that doesn't have these same cycles of use, right? Batteries are still complex, they still have all their intricate circuits and things, but they're not, we're not talking about the same kind of friction, wear and tear. So doing short trips is also bad because water accumulates in the engine overnight. For example, like when you bring the car home at night, it's warm and it cools down, it forms condensation, just very small amounts. But when you only drive short trips, this tiny amount of water doesn't get a chance to boil and dissolve away, and it continues to accumulate, and water in the oil is not good long term. So in the domain of short trips, commuting from home in the suburbs to work in the city, dropping the kids at school, you might do that twice a day, for example, running around doing the Christmas shopping, tight car parks, and generally doing all those domestic taxing duties. This is child's play for a Hyundai Inster, and you don't have the unerring sense that you're inflicting torture on the mechanical parts in your engine. Now, it is true that batteries are affected by extreme temperatures, the searing heat and the nail-biting cold, but here's the thing, right? They're extremes, aren't they? You're not living in Alaska. They're not the median Australian day. Certainly down south in Melbourne, the unequivocal best city in the country, we don't have those kind of extreme weathers. Sure, even in northern metro cities, you're still doing short trips, but we're not talking about long trips. This is the second car. This is the runabout, the one that you put the miles on to go get the takeaway and nick to the shops and do Saturday sports across town, that sort of thing. So, being only 42 or 49 kilowatt hours, depending on which model you get, the battery recharges from near empty to near full in an actual 30 minutes when you use public fast charging, provided it's functioning and not being used by someone else. So, unlike the big EVs, which often claim, these ridiculously short charging times, but that comes at a sacrifice of battery integrity, and that's because the faster you charge or discharge a battery, the worse it is for the battery chemistry inside, which is kind of why trickle chargers are called exactly that. Makes sense, right? So, anywho, my 10 amp outdoor power point was going to take about a day to get from half full to full. Now that's a standard normal power point, the one we use to run the ducted heating. But for daily use, doing only short trips and working from home, for example, that might actually be okay for example, my household where we work from home. But if I had a proper job, commuting 3 or 4 times a week, I'd spend $1,000 or so and get a proper 6 or 7 kilowatt charger installed under the carport for short turnaround times. But here's the thing, right? If you get that Friday working from home thing like us Melburnians, rock on, you could notionally plug it on, say, a Thursday night and leave the thing trickle charging until the weekend and have a full tank of electrons come Saturday for that bigger drive to the beach or whatever. Depends on how things are going to work in your situation, obviously. Performance. Interesting again is how this little EV goes compared with its nearest rivals, and it does actually have 2 completely different set of rivals. There's sort of the Kia Picanto, Suzuki Swift, Toyota Yaris, Mazda CX-3, Mazda 2 sort of crowd. But then there's also the sort of BYD Dolphin, Kia Niro, and whatever the late to the market hack job that Tesla is going to try and come up with sometime between now and 2035 or whenever it gets here. So if you're comparing it with the combustion microcars, you know, the Picanto, Swift, Mazda 2, it kind of blows them away in terms of performance. Although you wouldn't go out of your way to call the Inster quick. It does 0 to 100 in about 10 seconds, and that's kind of slow. But it's okay. It's good slow, and I'll get to that in a minute. But then there's the EVs, the Nero, the BYD Dolphin, which are all kind of quicker. There's an MG4 as well. They're all quicker than the Insta. But honestly, who cares? Performance is almost irrelevant unless it's actually so terrible you can't, you know, do functional things like overtake or just get up steep hills and things. But you absolutely do get that sweet zippy overtake done in an Insta. It's quite good. It's progressive, it's linear, it's just not throwing you back in the seat, and that's fine. In fact, that's probably the best part. But what is quite good also is that it doesn't notice it. It's very stable, it's planted, it's a little run around. It doesn't feel like it's gonna, you know, lift a wheel because it's so light in corners, and it feels quite planted on the road despite being so compact and having that slim profile. It's also important to know something about the instant performance in bigger EVs, and most car reviewers won't say this, but I bloody well will. To be honest, you probably don't have the driving skill to handle an electric vehicle with big reserves of instantaneous torque available at the touch of a throttle. They love to sell you on this stuff, you know, ludicrous mode, all that sort of thing, but I'm sorry, it's not just your physical and mental skills that aren't able to process that kind of brute acceleration, but you also cannot think fast enough about the consequences of other drivers who cannot process how quickly you're moving through time and space. Things like changing lanes to go around slow traffic, right? You change lanes to zip around them, the car in front doesn't see you because you're in their blind spot, and they pull out in front of you, bang. You know, human beings who can actually drive fast cars and drive cars fast do so in very controlled environments where they are surrounded by people who know how to drive fast. They're also surrounded by marshals with fire extinguishers and first aid, and they're trained to respond when things go wrong. It's called motorsport. But the stressed out mums and exhausted dads and slow nanas and distracted teenagers who share the roads with ludicrous Teslas and turbulent Taycans and bonkers BYDs and manic MGs, they don't know you're coming. Driving an EV fast, like a motorcycle, means you have to think for other drivers. You have to anticipate that they don't know what to do if you misjudge a corner, or you overwhelm the tyres, or you fail to see that rogue bolt that punctures your battery and sets it on fire, whatever it may be. A slower, more civilized EV like the Insta offers you the ability to make those smooth, clean passes and still, you know, keep the car on all four wheels and power around slow cars and get around trucks and do that sort of, you know, agility weaving thing that EVs are good for, right? There is a genuine benefit there, but what I'm saying here is less is more when it comes to power and torque in EVs. The inherent stability and drivability of Insta brings me to my next point. Safety. There was much ado about Insta's 4-star ANCAP safety rating, which you can check out over on Auto Expert, where John Cadogan uses what I would call surgical precision to politely disembowel ANCAP on this, and I'll put a link up there somewhere. So I urge you to go and watch it if you're interested in the Insta. Yeah, Insta's a very safe vehicle in modern terms. It's also much safer than pretty much all the microcars on sale today, which haven't been tested in donkey's years. But it's also safer because, unlike those micro city cars, it has a trick up its sleeve, I guess you'd call. So the Insta weighs about the same as a Toyota Corolla, but it's about 10-15% smaller than the Corolla. in all directions, right? So it's about maneuverability and agility. It's got the the quick weavability of Mr. Bean's Leyland Mini, but it's also quite heavy. And it's the mass that helps in the case of a crash. It does also help bring the center of gravity down, but put simply, the heavier your car is in a crash, the less terrible the outcome is for you. This is a very crude oversimplification, but in this context, if you get hit by a medium SUV, it's much better to be in an Inster weighing over 1,300 kilos than a Suzuki Swift weighing less than 1,000 kilos. So it's also better being in the medium SUV weighing 1,600 kilos, just so there's that for balance. However, I think there's a very good argument for smallness in terms of avoiding a crash entirely. I think there's something to be said, and it never gets talked about, but for being able to negotiate live traffic environments with agility, short stopping distances, driving with a smaller footprint. Also, this lowers your profile more so than the median vehicle driving around today. You know, the ones that sort of fill all of the lane. If you've got to, you know, move slightly this way or that way, or, you know, just alter something small just to avoid possible repercussions with something. You know, being small can be a benefit. What I experienced driving the Insta for 2 solid weeks of school, sports, shopping, parking, running around, is that there's less actual vehicle in my way, less vehicle to move around in. The steering is quick, both the rack and the response from the vehicle itself, from the Insta, so it doesn't feel like you turn the wheel and then wait for the rest of the barge to catch up, it just goes. I think there's something to be said for that. For example, there's a bunch of roundabouts on my street. Must be 10 of them. I've never counted them from one end to the next. And it's probably 1.5 Ks total distance. The Insta, it feels like ice skating. You know, you carve through the corner, roundabout after roundabout, in the same way that utes and SUVs and big dumb Teslas absolutely struggle to negotiate turn after turn, just terrified of rounded curbs and, you know, a little bit of suspension, you know, bump and rebound. So a couple of quick observations. We've just gotten off the freeway and it's an extremely windy day today. The crosswind does tend to push this little car around a bit because it hasn't quite got the track or the weight to sort of resist crosswind forces, but having said that, it's not terrible, and it does also ride quite nicely on the freeway, despite its lack of size and, you know, sound deadening and big tyres and all the kind of things that you get in a bigger family SUV that typically work towards sound attenuation in those circumstances. It's not terrible, it's not the best, but that's the whole point, is you get pretty good enough even, and the other drawback is that it's a bit cramped in here. My knees are up against both the dashboard and the door. There's reasonable leg room. I can kind of stretch out, but it is hard to take a jacket off in here, as I've just found out. I did get a cramp in my neck. That's not a fault of the car, that's just a fault of me being in my mid-30s and getting slightly fat. So, not bad, it's pretty comfortable. I can reach everything. I can reach over the back to grab something to pass to kiddo, which is a lot easier to do in this than it is in a typical medium to large SUV. You can't reach back to the second row seats in a 7-seat SUV. And the seats are very comfy. They're pretty good. They're nice and snug. There's good bolstering. It's good. I like it. We also need to talk about the brakes. The Insta stops hard. You've probably forgotten how good it feels to come to a dead stop in less than 2 car lengths. At least it feels like 2 car lengths. That's how hard this thing brakes at sort of suburban speeds, which is, where a lot of accidents actually happen. Now, I do agree this is anecdotal, but you can try the brakes for yourself if you don't believe me when you take it for a test drive in a nice quiet spot. Trust me. If you don't trust me, then try it for yourself. Inside, there are buttons. Buttons everywhere. It's great. Buttons for the HVAC, for volume, I think. It's great. I wish there was a shroud, a binnacle around the driver's display, but that's just a compromise you'll have to make. But you got to understand, this is a strict 4-seater, and that's okay because statistically, nobody ever really uses the middle seat in most cars, I presume. Rear legroom is more than generous, and it can be adjusted if you need more boot space and vice versa. Fitting child restraints is dead easy thanks to the no bullshit ISOFIX points and top tether anchor points that are actually, you can even reach them by just getting your arm through and touch them over the back. You don't really have to bring the seat back forward. The door bins, I have to say, are terrible. They're basically mail slots where only kids' books and snotty tissues will fit. But the good news is there's storage holes in the front, in the sort of center console area for your phone and sundry bits and bobs. Fortunately, you or the 2IC parent can easily reach in the back and give little passengers their water bottle or banana or whatever they're after. There's no fold down armrest, with the normal built-in cup holder / storage hole, but there are plenty of child restraint and cup holder type accessories that you can find in local auto retailers and baby retail stores without mentioning the name. There are options. It's not the end of the world. Alternatives. You might also consider the MG4 EV at this price point, and sure, that's not a bad vehicle as I understand it. But which car company has been selling reliable EVs in Australia the longest? It's not MG, it's Hyundai. Plus the MG4 is still kind of the same size as a Corolla, so you're just getting the same relatively sized vehicle as everyone else. You don't get that advantage of the Inster's smallness, right? Tesla says they're going to do a mini EV, but who knows when it'll arrive, and it'll probably cost more than they claim. And who knows, then a month later they'll slash the price, and then who knows what subscription service Uncle Elon will sign you up to while saluting. The Kia Picanto is an excellent small city car, and it is genuinely delightful to drive. Although since they boned the 1 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder, it's not as exciting to drive as the old version. That might not be relevant to you, in which case, yeah, Picanto is a good car. Suzuki Swift is an almost 10-year-old car that is also a bit of a clunker, if I'm honest. It's really light, doesn't get a knee airbag or front center airbag that sort of stops you clunking heads in a crash. It doesn't score very well in basic crash testing, especially for kids in the back. And the interior quality is cheap and hard plastics are everywhere. I don't like that car, just like I don't like the Suzuki Jimny. And the BYD Dolphin is called a Dolphin. Do you really want to drive a Dolphin? Now, I'm being facetious and a smart ass. But you know what the interesting thing about Dolphins is? They don't look it up. No, don't look it up. The BYD brand also has a bit of a poor customer support history in recent years, so I'd sort of wait and see if they manage to turn that ship around, in my view. Last words. Not everyone is ready for an EV. That's fair enough. But there's a very strong usage case for the Inster, even for the ordinary Australian car buyer. It's easily going to cover a big chunk of that typical daily driving we all do in that routine, structured way where we drive the same roads at the same time of day until the bigger, more capable long-term second car, like a petrol SUV or diesel dual cab ute, is going to be more reliable and more accommodating for those bigger trips a few times a year, Easter, Christmas holidays, all that sort of stuff. The Inster is not quite a multi-purpose tool like an SUV, or at least as SUVs purport to be, as they're sold to be. But that's what makes Inster so ideal. It's the exact tool for this specific job of cold starts, a few passengers, some shopping, lots of short trips. That's what it's good for. That's its purpose. And what it does is it takes mileage and wear and tear off your bigger, more expensive SUVs, 4x4s, or dual cab utes, right? And unlike the more expensive, underutilized, pretend adventure SUVs, which are more expensive long term, but offer wasted potential, you're much more likely to use an Inster in its full potential 5 or 6 days a week. And that is bang for your buck. See you next time.